Hi, kids, students. This is Monday, July 6th, 2020, summer school, Shasta College, Humanities 2. We're tripping through the humanities quickly. We're down to 2 more weeks of class. That is it, folks. And I'm only doing literature this week, throwing some poetry, if I can get it in there in time. And next week we'll do films, movies. And before you get all excited about watching the new X-Men or John Wick, you're going to have to suffer through some ancient history. Because we got to know why we are who we are. And films certainly show that. In fact, that's the great thing about this class in humanities in general. I'm not saying this class is great. I know it's been different because it's all online. Usually it's in the classroom. But what's great, interesting about humanities as a whole, it explores the best part of what we've done as human beings. Everything from the architecture. I don't have time to go to architecture in this short class this summer, but to modern freeways, highways, plumbing, buildings, art, paintings, film, music, actors, theater, and today we're going to talk about literature. We're not going to go too far back. I want you guys to look at the textbook on page 289. It starts realism in literature. That's what I want to focus on because in early days of literature, a lot of it was religious oriented or historically oriented, but along came in the middle 1800s or so came a new sort of realism, what we would refer to like modernism, modern literature. Russian writers like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy were writing in a more realistic fashion with people we can relate to and understand, recognize. They're not far-fetched tales. Charles Dickinson, a master of writing for his times, with his serials that he wrote in the newspaper that became novels. Maybe you've seen some of the movies made by his books. Maybe read something. They're always very in-depth, very human, and done in this realistic manner that we weren't used to until the time these people were starting to write. Madame Bovary by Flaubert was another groundbreaking novel from the 1800s, 19th century, and things are starting to change. In fact, if we were taking a literature class, we would read some excerpts from Madame Bovary, and you would see how contemporary it is. It's almost like our contemporary, in a way, the contemporary romantic literature that's been huge, but also went into movies and television, started with Madame Bovary. Has to start somewhere, folks. Another great Russian writer, Chekhov, who's known for mostly writing famous plays like The Cherry Orchard and Three Sisters and the Seagull. Russian writer. He wrote some amazing short stories, and if you read them, I wish you will one day. Maybe I should make an assignment where you go read one of his short stories online. I won't torture you too bad with that, but if you read one of his short stories, you'll be amazed how contemporary It is. If you replace people's mode of transportation, buggies, and horses with autos and the subway, it's as contemporary as it was when he wrote it, in the late 1800s in Russia, of all places, which was a great groundswell of literary giants like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy writing War and Peace, Crime and Punishment, The Idiot. These are legendary epic stories. Now, when you read this old fiction, like somebody like Moby Dick, by Melville, what you'll find in it is a lot of detail because this is long before we have cameras and movies. And so when people described, let's say, a house or a bar or a boat out on the ocean, they describe it in detail. We don't need to do that anymore because we've all seen enough movies and television. We know what a bar looks like. We know what the inside of a restaurant looks like. Now all we have to do is know if it's an upscale restaurant, if it's a McDonald's. That's all we need to know. And we all know what a ship looks like. But in those days, most people never seen a ship, let alone on one. Now we're virtually on a boat in every war movie ever made. A lot. Tom Hanks has a new movie coming out and called The Greyhound, set in the Atlantic Ocean during World War II, with the U-boats attacking the freighters, and it's all on ships. Now, I've never been on a U-boat, but I certainly have been on one in a movie, and so I know what it is. I know what a submarine's like, but go back 200 years, and nobody knew what that meant. They had it, so they described it. And so you read something like Moby Dick, and it describes the world around them more than we need have it described nowadays. Let's just give you an example. Dostoevsky's one of his novels, I think it's The Idiot. I can't remember. He describes a room. It takes him 3 pages to describe, and he describes the wallpaper, the floorboards, the ceiling, everything. Proust, in his many volumes of remembrance, describes a tree in like 5 pages. That's a lot of description of a tree. But he was painting a picture. He was painting a movie before movies. And so people read it. They understood it. They had the patience for it. We don't have the patience for it now, do we, folks? But modern, contemporary, realistic literature was starting with these people. Also, there was a time in history where very few people knew how to read. Mostly it was the very wealthy, or it was religious monasteries. That's who did most of the writing also. They weren't writers, they were transcribing. And so very few readers, folks. That all changed with modern education. Schools changed, public schools, universities. That changed everything. And all of a sudden, the common man, the ordinary person, didn't have to be rich. He doesn't have to be a monk in a monastery, knew how to read. And they were reading, get this, folks, for pleasure. It gave them pleasure to kind of escape into the world of a novel. Just to for those of you who, the language I throw out there, I don't expect you guys to know any of this stuff, and that's okay. That's why you're here. I got to kind of go through it quickly, I'm afraid to say. But when I say novel, I mean a work of fiction. Don't confuse nonfiction or autobiography or memoir with a novel. They're totally different things. Uh, and a novel is fiction, folks. And I've taught fiction. I have a degree. One of my degrees is in fiction writing, how to write fiction. Anyway, and people will say, "Oh, then you're not writing the truth." Yeah, well, that's where I beg to differ. There's more truth probably in fiction than nonfiction. Period. Same with films. Every film you see is a made-up story, folks. It didn't happen, but there's a lot of truth in those stories. Documentaries, even in some documentaries, it didn't happen. You could fudge the facts easily. So when people say, "Oh, you're writing a work of fiction or your movie's a work of fiction," oh, it's not the truth. Oh, let me tell you, it's the holy truth. In fact, I don't like those. I don't like when people try to sell their books or their movies by going based on a true story. I mean, I don't care. Based on a true story, really? Um, I don't think we need that. I don't care. If it's a good story, it is the truth. Did it happen? That's another question. Does it matter? Does it matter that it's based on something that happened? Or is it more important that it conveys the truth of what happened? Truman Capote, a great writer who was writing in the 60s, wrote a wonderful book called In Cold Blood about our first, folks, about a serial killing. I guess I'm not saying it was a serial killing because they only killed this one family, so they weren't that ambitious. But when this happened, it shook the whole nation because we didn't have serial killers before, folks. Now it seems like they're a dime a dozen. They're on every TV show. Every cop is looking for a serial killer. We must have millions of serial killers, And I think movies that I don't like, Hannibal Lecter and Silence of the Lambs or that stuff, they romanticize the serial killer. He wrote this book about these two low-educated thugs who tied up a family, 5 of them, the Clutter family in Kansas, and executed them. They stole a few things from the house, and he wrote this book, really wonderful book, and made it into a really good movie by Richard Brooks, the director, by the way. And Capote said, when he asked him, "What kind of book is this?" He said, "It's a nonfiction novel." So he took both genres of nonfiction because he's telling a story that actually happened, but he's fictionalizing a lot of it because he wasn't there. He's making up dialogue that he would never know what was going on in the house between the family. How would he know that? He wasn't there. Nobody was recording what was being said. He had to come up with a piece of fiction, but it was truthful fiction. Same thing with the criminals. We don't know what's being said when they're driving out in the car. How would we know that? This is long before everybody has cell phone and social networking. So how do you know that? Well, he interviewed a ton of people. He did. It took him many years to write this. So he's got a pretty good estimate of possible conversations. And so that's why but it was a brilliant marketing device by calling it a nonfiction novel. And it really started kind of a genre that is still thriving to this day. Later on, Norman Mailer wrote a great book called Executioner's Song about Gary Gilmore, who was another guy who went on a shooting spree. And it reads like a novel. It does not read like a nonfiction artifact, meaning it has more drama. It has more what we're used to in a storytelling device. They're page turners. They're not just boring facts of what happened at the crime scene. he dramatizes it in Executioner's Song, stealing from Truman Capote, a nonfiction novel. We have this need. Get rid of my gum here; it's bugging me. We have this need for stories, storytelling. Maybe you're a storyteller. Are you? Do you tell your friends stories? Do you like this? This need for stories is insatiable. I mean, just look right now. I'm talking about literature today. I don't know if you guys ever go to a bookstore. I hope you do. There's just a lot of books there. And there's, even though this is the age of visual media, meaning visual audio, movies, and YouTube, and streaming movies and TV series, the novel is still very much alive. I don't know if you guys read novels. I hope you do. Novels have gotten smaller in my day because we're in a hurry. We want a fast read, just like we want to binge watch something in one night. We're in a hurry to get all our input, or the stuff we need to keep us going. So literature has literally shaped the world, more so than just about anything. Because when people could read, it expanded the universe to other worlds that most of us will never get to experience. And yes, you can do that with music, and you can do that with painting. But boy, can you really do it in literature? If I was in class right now, I'd ask you what you're reading. If anybody reads, I've had students who literally have proudly announced that they don't read anything. And I go, well, you just missed out on 90% of what we are as human beings has been put down in literature. Yes, you could get things off the internet. You could get things on YouTube. You can get your fast fix. But to sit down and read a novel, you go into a world that you've never experienced, and it will change you in many, many different ways. Hopefully. Maybe you don't need changing. You're perfect, I know that. But I need to read because I'm far from perfect. Anyway, so do you read? Do you read fiction? Do you read novels? What would the last novel you read? Can you remember what it was? Did it mean anything to you? Was it Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, or was this a piece of literary fiction by Charles Bukowski? I kind of doubt that one, but maybe I'm wrong. Someone mentioned to me, I don't know who it was, a student said, are you going to talk about Kurt Vonnegut? Maybe not today, but Vonnegut's part of the 20th century, mid-20th century writers that were so important in shaping who we are right now as a culture. And with his movies, Slaughterhouse-Five and Cat's Cradle. And it can't be overestimated or over-discussed, the importance of somebody like Kurt Vonnegut on the culture. When I was going to college, long before you guys were in existence, Kurt Vonnegut was all the rage. You read the newest Vonnegut, you could not wait to get, and he couldn't wait to talk about it. You discussed it because it was so clever and so witty, and that you go, wow, who came up with this? You know, as a novelist, I've tried to write novels in my day. I had a novel I was trying to sell when I lived in Los Angeles, and I sent out a letter to an agent, and they want you to constantly, this is what they do, folks, they want you to compare yourself to some other writer so that they don't have to do the work. They don't have to read your stuff. They go, oh, I don't like him. I don't like Stephen King, so I'm not going to even read your stuff. And so I put out my letter, and I used Kurt Vonnegut as an influence. And I got so many different people calling me, agents, going, oh, send the book. And I remember this one woman, I never forget this. She actually called me on the phone. It was some agent in Hollywood. She called me. She was kind of upset. And she goes, "Well, I read what you sent me, sent her 10 pages." And she goes, "But it's no Kurt Vonnegut." She got angry. And I go, "I didn't say it was Kurt Vonnegut. I just said he was an influence." Anyway, so she felt I fibbed. Hey, everybody fibs on their resumes, folks. If you want to feel like you're Kurt Vonnegut, freak, go ahead and say. If you want to think you're, you know, Stephen King, go ahead. Why not? Use it. Anyway, same with music. What does your music sound like? What does your art look like? Everybody wants to compare it to somebody else. That puts it in a safe category. What if it doesn't have any of those categories? You go, well, I can't define. I don't know who my influences are. People that upsets people. Anyway, so literature shaped our world. It helped us hold a mirror up to us. It still is. Nonfiction is selling more than ever before because look at the times we're living in. These political times, radically political times, with the global warming and the pandemic and the politics in Washington. People are cranking out books like crazy, and people are reading those books. So evidently, there is a need for trying to understand who we are, and writers, hopefully, if they're good, are trying to hold up a mirror to try to show us in a meaningful way, not in a hateful, ridiculous manner, but in something that has meaning and resonance to us as human beings. Um, and that's what good literature does. Uh, Even mediocre literature attempts to do that. Um, anyway, it shows literature can show up the mirror to who we are, to our better selves. And hopefully we have a better self. Anyway, read this chapter 289. It's only 3 or 4 pages. I'll assign some more chapters later. I'm not going to go on and on. Today it's Monday, first day of literature. I'm grading the paper still, so please have patience. I got a little bogged down. I'm teaching a couple other classes, and so I'm getting a little overwhelmed because it's all online. Everybody's very needy, and trying to communicate everything via the computer is frustrating for not just you folks, but for me also, because I don't want to be misunderstood, and I want you guys to be clear what we're doing. Anyway, so I'm still grading the papers. I have maybe 10 papers on the Dutch painters you had to do, and then I'm going to start in on the other ones that were due today rather, midnight. Um, I'm going to sign another paper this week. I don't know what it is yet. It's going to be on a writer or literature. And I'll do that on Wednesday or Thursday, and it'll be due next week. I'll try to start a discussion with you guys. Also, that's what we're getting graded on. Keep up on your journals. I can't stress that further. Look at the last discussion about music. How does participate? I go in there and read those things. I look at who's participating, who isn't. I do check off who's not participating, and so points are going to get shaved off. You don't want that. Who needs that? So you want to go talk about music, any kind of music. Why do you listen to music? Why does music matter? Do you listen to music? Does it matter? Why? Why not? What do you listen to? Share it with everybody. Nobody's being critical. Nobody cares. Hopefully nobody cares. And if you do, keep it to yourself. Be civil to each other. Don't be a jerk in the comments. So, what else might I want to cover here? Let me look at my notes. That's really it. So, on literature, read those chapters. I'm going to look at some stuff. I have to find this stuff because now you're not in the class with me. I usually hand out excerpts of books and stuff. Can't do that right now. So I'll look at some excerpts and things. I'll say, hey, read these. What's your opinion on it? Maybe write a paper about it. That's what we're doing this week. Folks, we're reading this week. And if you're a writer, this is your day. This is your week to shine. And hopefully at the end of the week, I'll get into some poetry too. And maybe you love poetry and maybe not. But we're going to talk about it. I guess this is humanities in 2020, and we need it more than ever. Okay, kids, I will see you in a couple days. Have patience on the grading. Read a book. I can make some suggestions. I'll go easy on you. Adios.